Councillor Absence.
Well, to prevent the job Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Kelly Sutton intervening as well. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Killen?
Yes, it's not a pecuniary interest, but agenda item 4A, domain sale, application for a children's home. I own a business that provides supported accommodation, which is children's residential social care, which is very similar in nature. I don't know the applicant, and I feel I can view the application with an open mind. I'm not predetermined.
Thank you very much, Councillor Killen. Minutes of the previous meeting, can they be agreed to, please? Agreed. So there's been a little bit of a typo on the agenda, as both items are petition items. And I can see that a number of people have come from the forward way applications. So I'm going to suggest that we take that one first. Okay. So if members don't mind, can we do that? I agree. Great.
Thank you, Chair. The report for this application begins on page 19 of the agenda and relates to the proposed conversion of a residential dwelling into a 4-bedroom house in multiple occupation, which with access via a pedestrian passageway. The application is brought before Planning Committee following receipt of a petition with 531 signatures in objection, endorsed and called in by Councillor Joe Johnson. In addition, 30 objections have been received from 29 individual addresses. As the site falls within the area affected by Article 4 direction, permitted development rights no longer apply. It is important to note that the Article 4 direction does not prohibit HMOs. It simply removes automatic permitted development rights, ensuring proposals are assessed against the Council's adopted policies and guidelines. The site is located within a primarily residential area. Council records confirm that none of the 70 properties within a 100-metre radius of the site are in use as flats or HMOs, meaning the proposal remains below the 10% threshold and complies with guidance on avoiding over-concentration. In light of Sefton's current housing land supply shortfall of 3.5 years, the creation of 2.2 equivalent dwellings through this proposal is a material consideration. The internal layout meets national space standards, with each unit providing integrated kitchen facilities and access to a shared kitchen on the ground floor. The existing property is a 3-bedroom dwelling capable of accommodating at least 4 occupants. While the proposal introduces some intensification, primarily through converting the ground floor living room into a bedroom, the principle of residential occupation is established. The site provides 40 square metres of outdoor amenity space, meeting the Council's minimum requirement. The Council's waste management team confirms sufficient bin storage within the rear garden, and no external alterations are proposed, and the scheme is not considered to have any significant impact on neighbouring living conditions in terms of overshadowing, outlook or loss of privacy. The Environmental Health Manager raises no objections subject to the installation of proposed party wall sound insulation, which can be secured by condition. Although no off-street parking is provided, the site is considered to be in a sustainable location with good access to public transport and local amenities. The Highways Manager raises no objections subject to conditions requiring cycle storage. In summary, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle, complies with adopted planning policies and supplementary guidance, contributes to housing supply, and is not considered to cause significant harm to neighbouring residents. It is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions set out on pages 30 and 31 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I invite Whenever you're ready.
Thanks for letting me speak today. My name's obviously Nicola Loughlin, and I live on the resident of Bowman Drive, excuse me, of the estate. I've had a couple of breaks in between, but that's, I've always lived there and so has my family. I started the petition to see how the residents are feeling about the new proposed HMM on the estate. As we already have 3, one being 13 full way, which is under 100 metres where it is. And we also have another HMO, which is also a hostel on Bowman Drive. I'd just like to tell you a little bit of what it's like living in a community with 3 existing HMOs and the hostel run by Sefton. In the past 12 months, and this is only the last 12 months, as a community, we've suffered with antisocial behaviour, drug and alcohol abuse, and issues, drug dealing, flight and overcrowding conditions. We've had criminality, especially in 13 local way. The resident was arrested for trying to entice a 9-year-old little girl to go with him in his home, which was actually overcrowded. It was meant to be 4 adults. There was 8 single occupants men living in the property. We've had terrible bullying to the next door neighbour, number 15 Forward Way, who fled from domestic abuse. We've had, as I said, the overcrowding, just talking about 13 Forward Way at the moment. And the significant others that we bring in. So you double that, because that's how many are living in the house, realistically. Can check on all the police activity in 13 Forward Way, because there's been many. From the overcrowding, we've got significant flight tipping, because there's certainly not enough rooms. And the parking, because of the amount of people in the 13 Forward Way, is overcrowded too. So that's, we're finished there on 13 Forward Way. Now where I live myself personally, I have the other 3 right next to me. I live alone, I'm quite vulnerable. We've got 59 children, which is the end of my block, even though I'm Bowland, it's where the house is situated. And then we've got 33 children. And then right opposite my house is the hostel run by Sefton. That's fun, that's 135 Bowland Drive. So I do feel very vulnerable living alone, and I'm quite young living alone compared to a lot of the elderly on the estate. I'm vulnerable. So the hostel, which is 153, the resident next door, they suffer, their daughter suffers, she's non-verbal autistic child. They have to suffer constant drug use, drug dealing, and nightly visits from prostitutes, because they just come to jail, so they're enjoying their life now they're free. Unfortunately, the little girl has to listen to everything that goes on in the house, which is frightening. We had another neighbour who lives across the road, in one of the thinking numbers. She was threatened with a knife by one of the residents, the ex-prisoners, for watching her pig on too loudly. If you can believe it, apparently that's what happened. I'll go on to number 59. The overcrowding in there has been 4 single adults, none of them know each other. There's 6 single men living in there at the moment. We've got a constant noise after 10 o'clock, it's like a party goes on. The flight tipping is horrendous. The rubbish isn't enough for the 6 people that live there, and again, that's their partners they bring in as well, boyfriends, girlfriends, whichever. And there's an elderly man next door who is frightened all the time. Luckily, the other neighbour next door to that is died, so she doesn't have to put up with it anymore. 33, antisocial, noise pollution, lots of rubbish. In summary, you've got enough HMOs on the estate. We do deal with a lot as a community. We are a vulnerable community. the housing shortage for 3-bedroom family houses, why are you considering another one?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you just hold on 1 second?
Yeah.
Is there any members who wish to clarify anything Nicola has said? Councillor Hall.
Thank you. You did say that the other HMOs and facilities are within 100 metres.
Oh, yeah.
They are. Is that
The problem is, what I found out, is no one monitors them. You just don't know if it's 100 metres. We've got one end, which is 2 houses, and 3 houses down, it's 13.
Thank you.
So it's over, you know, it's ridiculous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson. You also have 5 minutes, so whenever you're ready, please begin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Firstly, I do acknowledge that there's absolutely a need for high-quality HMOs in areas where there is demand. However, in St Oswald, we already have one of the highest concentration of HMOs in Sefton. That's a fact. And this can only be because the property prices in our area are lower than in other areas. Last week, 2 of my fellow councillors said to me that they don't get problems like this in their ward. Of course they don't, because their properties are worth around about £400,000. In our ward, they're worth about £80,000 or £90,000. And that's why we see landlords targeting our area purely for business purposes, creating an imbalance, and that is unfair in my community. St Oswald suffers from high rates of crime and a large concentration of HMOs polluting can lead to an increased crime and antisocial behaviour. The officer's report that's before you doesn't show any data or response from Merseyside Police. Why is that? But luckily enough, I have the figures here for you. The latest police figures for St Oswald alone in November 2025, this is 1 month, 60 violent and sexual offences, 19 public order offences, 18 criminal damage offences, and 11 antisocial behaviour offences. That's in 1 month in St Oswald. For the last 12 months in St Oswald, it's even more scary. Over 600 violent and sexual offences in St Oswald, nearly 200 public order, over 150 criminal damage, and over 150 antisocial behaviour offences in my ward. I know that not all these incidents are directly linked to HMOs. However, I can tell you that a significant portion of my casework involves complaints related to HMOs in my ward, crime and their occupants causing disturbance. Last year, some of you may remember, there were 2 serious and isolated incidents involving HMOs, directly involving HMOs in our ward. A male was arrested, walking around Marion Square carrying a knife, and 3 males were arrested a week or so later after a serious stabbing of another person living in that HMO. Both of these serious incidents are requiring a large-scale police response. These events and issues we see around HMOs have heightened the fear amongst our residents, and any additional HMOs will only increase that fear and pose a further risk to our residents. This proposed HMO in the Pendle Estate is an end terrace with a pathway being blocked at one end. This means you only have one way in and one way out to access the property. There's poor lighting and no CCTV in the area. It is accessible through a walkway and surrounded by fields. If approved, this will cause disturbance to neighbours and will significantly harm the character of the area without risk to safety and security for everyone. I believe this proposal is contrary, and I've got some of the policies here, is contrary to Sefton Local Plan PC4. Number 2A, it will harm the character of the area. 2B, it will affect the living conditions for either the occupants or, in this case, the neighbouring properties. Second policy EQ2, the design, layout and access must ensure the safety and security of those inside and, more importantly, those outside the property. I believe it is also contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 96B, that says all planning policies and decisions that that this property should be safe and accessible so that crime and disorder and fear of crime do not undermine the quality of life or the community cohesion. Paragraph 135 of the NPPF. Development should promote health and well-being, ensuring crime and fear of crime do not affect community cohesion. And paragraph 198 of the NPPF. Applications must consider any effects on health, living conditions and the environment. We all know that Sefton Council introduced an remedial Article 4 last year. This is to ensure that all HMOs are properly scrutinised by this committee. As elected members, it is our responsibility to protect communities from unsuitable developments. This is not a suitable location for another HMO, and by approving it, it will increase the crime and the fear of crime and the risk to residents, and will absolutely harm community cohesion and well-being. My request is that this committee refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So the applicant isn't reading, so isn't speaking. So members, if any comments to the officers, is there any? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just picking up on the points that have been made by the ward councillor and some of the residents. The very nature of an HMO, if it's not well managed, can create problems, regardless of how many you have in the area. Anyway, it seems to be quite a flooding of it, really. And if we've got catalogue of incidents that are well documented by the police, why haven't we got any comments from the police, or have we made any representations in the officer to the police to check on, if they have any issues?
John.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor. So, for this type of application for HMO, given its nature, while we acknowledge there is a difference between HMO and regular dwelling, it isn't something that we would normally consult Merseyside Police from. Obviously, Merseyside Police have the weekly list to look at, and if they feel there is a need to comment on such an application, they will obviously take that into account. Security and crime has been in some weight in the application, so in the assessment that you'll see on, I think it's from paragraph 6.20 onwards. So, although some weight has been given, it's a decision for members to decide how much weight they want to give with regard to the figures that have been given by Councillor Johnson. Thank you.
Councillor King.
Yeah, I've just got two questions. Want them both at the same time, or? Yeah, I can do both at the same time. So the first one, Councillor actually touched on it, refers to natural surveillance and the ability both of residents on property and the others to surveil property. Having visited it is very noticeable that giving access to property is via, I don't know what the correct term for this, alleyways, or perhaps regardless. I think, as I believe is the case, when fencing is put up on that right-hand wall there will functionally be no surveillance from the property of possibly up to 3 to 4 cars that could be in that area, and there will be no surveillance from the street of the property. I'm just wondering how much weight was that given in the application process, because especially in light of the crime problems, having a property that can't return parking and that can't be surveilled possibly right from the middle, it seems like quite a serious issue. And just kind of following up on that second question is, it mentions in the report about the number of HMOs in 100 metre radius, and of course this has been brought by petitioner. I had kind of assumed that, and this might be my ignorance of it, I kind of assumed that was all properties within 100 metres, or do we literally put a radius on property that is 100 metres? Because of course that particular property has multiple fields and a shopping centre next to it, but that's not necessarily representative of the estate it's a part of. And so I was just wondering, I guess what I'm saying is, are those fields and that supermarket included in that 100 metre radius? Because that's naturally going to skew them down as causing any sort of over capacity or over intensification of the area.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor. So I'll answer the first question and then my colleague hopefully comment on the second question and the concern around that. So yeah, regarding natural surveillance, of course it is something that is thought about, but normally that is something that's thought about when you're talking about a new build. I think in this situation, given it is an existing situation, there's not much that can be done. I think now if we were to, with building, new whole development, natural surveillance will be a much more important part of the assessment, but given that this is an existing situation, there's not much that can be done. As I said earlier, we do compare this, regardless, we can't take management into question given that we don't know, who the applicant is necessarily all of the time. So we assess this as though it's similar to a residential dwelling. It's an existing situation, so there's not much more that we can do with regard to improving that natural surveillance in that area. Don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just pick up on Mr. Kerr's first point. He's explaining the situation in planning terms, which would suggest that a house and an HMO are similar. Okay, and that's the basis on which that argument is made. But I think we also accept that a house that's going to be occupied by, say, 4 adults will have more impact, potentially in terms of those comings and goings, but it's not something that we can set out in planning terms. And again, as the point he made, it's up to the members of this committee to decide how much weight they want to put to that point when reaching a decision. Thank you.
Kev, for the second point.
Thank you, Chair. Just answering the second point there. It is a measurement that we take. It's taken from the central property, and then the radius, 100 metre radius, taken from that angle. So in this scenario, it is a bit skewed in relation to the fields that are in that area, but we have to remain consistent in how we approach that. It's not a side-by-side basis, so we have to make sure that we take that distance.
And is that sort of national planning framework that says it's a radius and not a sort of, I don't know the correct term for it, but not sort of analysis of the estate itself, but it's with that assessment planning.
It's a second planning guideline that we include within our supplementary planning guidelines.
So, Councillor Sonia Kelly.
I just want to clarify, we are on about HMOs in the area where we've heard there definitely are, but on page 25, 6.5, isn't it, where they're saying there are none. So are they out of the catchment area for your measurements, or are they just not registered, you don't know about them, in which case how many are on that estate that we don't know about?
John? Thanks for your question, Councillor. So it's our local plans team who look at the concentration of the SPD, and the assessment uses HMO licences, planning history and valuation office agents and council tax funding. So they've looked at all that information, and within that radius that they looked at, they haven't found any properties. It could be that there are properties in use that might not have permission to actually operate in these instances. And I suppose we're often, if we're not told about it by the local public, once we do find out, then it's for our planning enforcement team to sort of get involved and look at if there are any issues. And I don't know if that's too much to go. Thank you.
Councillor Burrow.
Thank you, Chair. I heard the explanations on this application, and I'm concerned about the concentration of facilities of that nature in the area. We've heard nothing to dissuade me. We've heard about the antisocial behaviour and the crime was recorded. I'm astonished the police haven't made a comment, or that they haven't been pursued for a comment, and I would think we would not be sensible to continue it without that information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
I mean, I second what you just said there. I'd also ask the question, would we be able to draw a map of where all our HMOs are in Sefton? Because I would have thought that that would be the first step to determining whether we have an overconcentration in a particular area or not. I mean, I take Councillor Johnson's point about it is a financial motive. This is where you can buy properties cheap. And if you do the properties up, the best way of making a profit from them is as an HMO, not as a family house.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fair question. Because of the sources that we've talked about, as part of this exercise of mapping, we do produce a map that identifies some of those properties, and there are valid reasons why that information can't be put in the public domain. But rest assured that we do have that information and we use it as well.
Is there any of the members who have a question to officers?
Yeah, Chairman, can I move that this be rejected based on, policy EQ2.2B, which is based on the national surveillance that we've mentioned. And then there's also, I'm sure you don't have the exact thing, but in the end, I believe we talked about, as Councillor Johnson, the possibility of closing the crime in the period of time. And so I feel like based on those points, we should move to
May I second that, Chair?
Mr. Kenton, clarify something.
So, thank you, Councillor. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, from the point that you made previously, you feel like the sort of disconnect from where the car park is in the house and the paths and alleyways that lead to that there's a lack of surveillance, and that could promote a fear of crime in the community. Is that the essence of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I have Councillor Brough, the seconder. Is that correct, Councillor Brough?
Correct, Chair.
Okay. All those in favour of rejecting this application? That's unanimous. So, moving on. If anyone wishes to leave, if you want to, after that, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We'll give you 5 minutes.
Let's write up.